Like that applause was for me. Before I begin, I really want to welcome Ray, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a bit. But Ray and I go way back, like 40 years back. And the other thing that, because drummers never get any respect, Dale is leaving us, and so I just wanted to give him a shout out and wish him the best in the real world, and hope that that he comes back to us soon. Here's my other shout out. On the third week of Advent, I think it's so appropriate that a woman lights the Advent calendar. The Advent calendar. I'm thinking of chocolate today. The Advent candles. And in typical Judeo-Christian world, the lighting of candles have certain significance, but the color of the candle or the color of the oil also has significance. In the Reformation world, in the Protestant world, the words for Advent is different than in the Catholic world. And so I'm going to tell you a story today that has to do with why the candle is the color pink. And also, what are we talking about when we talk about the love of God? And what are we talking about when we say that the third week is the week of joy? There are different ideas in different churches about what joy is. And so the common perception in Western philosophies of Christianity is that joy, like grace, is a thing that just falls down on you. It's something you experience. It's something that's given to you. We have a sense in most of the Abrahamic faiths that we are helpless and that God just dumps stuff on us. Here, have some grace. Here, have some joy. Here, have some comfort. Here, have some chocolate. God as Santa Claus, I think of it as. And the traditional ideas within the church of all Abrahamic faiths was not that at all. I think that when you look at what words mean, you find out that they don't mean what we think they mean anymore. So the third week of Advent, if you're Catholic, your priest will be wearing pink today. And he'll be wearing pink and he'll light a pink candle. Now, in the old church, that never happened. The 1 week in the year that a woman got to light the candle, because they do it every week, you know. The 1 week is this week. So this week is the week that the woman gets to light the candle, and the candle is pink. And we have all kinds of beliefs about the color pink around that. And the Victorian and before that, Roman ideas of what colors mean and what certain flowers mean. So this is the week of the rose, and the rose is represented by the color pink, and the color pink represents the mother. And that's really important, and we're going to talk about why that's important today. If you are Roman Catholic, you would refer to this week as Leotari. Leotari, forgive my Latin, is the idea of Advent as sort of a 40-day period, right, of just penitence and fasting and suffering. And, you know, this year, all of that is so meaningless because, you know, we've had a year of Lent, right? And so we've given up so many things. And so part of what this day is supposed to be is a day where you can rejoice, right? And so rejoicing in Leotari, in the Latin way, is not a passive thing. On this day, God gives you joy every other day of the week, but this day you have a job to do. So you have to rejoice. So that's a verb, that's not a noun. It's not something that falls in your lap or comes on your head or something like that. And what that means is that you have to give joy. How do you give joy? Well, it used to be that you just sang, all right? So we have the word canzone, that we just sing. And so you make a joyful noise, right? So I'm going to make a joyful noise later, and it will probably sound more like noise than music, but know that I'm trying to give you joy, right? Now, as the church moved on and it got bigger and they had more and more things to do and they had more and more things to fund, it looked more like this. This is what Leotari is that people actually take their paychecks and stick it on the altar. So these are all of the checks that I've gotten, right? And it's Advent, and so I put it on the altar to have it blessed, and that's how I bring joy, right? And so they're going to take that, right, and they're going to feed people with it, and they're going to, do all kinds of things with it. Now, back in the day, and by the day I mean in the Renaissance, doing good works was carving gargoyles and making really fine doors and creating a middle class of artisans that we call the Renaissance. And so there weren't many poor people to feed because the plague was going on. And all of the poor people, of course, were just dying, right? And that was not just in Florence. That was just worldwide this was going on. And so that's where we get the other idea. Now, things had gone bad for the church, the Catholic Church, for centuries. And they'd gone bad, so bad, that people started to leave the church. And so there was this guy, I think his name was Martin Luther, who took and wrote a note and nailed it on the door and left the church forever, and created another movement that we think of as Protestantism or the Reformation or the Rebel Alliance, whatever our picture is of people who left that, partially because they disagreed with them philosophically, but also because they disagreed with them in terms of what they were doing with money and for people and all kinds of things. Now, like all other things, like all other revolutions, once you get into power, it's more common that you just start doing all the same things that the people before you did. And so one of the things that happened was there was a decision to say, what are all of the things that we used to do with the old church that we want to do with the new church? And one of the things that was kept was Advent and the 40 days of the holy period or the sacred months or whatever the words that were used, and there were many words in many languages. In the Lutheran Church, which is the Church of Martin Luther, of the Protestant Church, the word that has come to be used since the 17 and 1800s is a Latin word, and it's called Gaudete. Anybody ever hear about that? Gaudete is what they use instead of Leotari, and so Leotari is rejoice, Gaudete is rejoice, and they're both Latin, but they mean different things, okay? And so one of them is one is a male word. The male word is here, have some money, there, rejoice, it's all settled, right? Gaudete is different. Gaudete means rejoice by sacrificing, and not by giving money, but by making the ultimate sacrifice. And in the 1700s, this was really, really important because the plague had come back. Now, if you think about yourself in the 1700s, you don't think about the plague as, oh, that's the flu and that's the bubonic plague, and that plague is plague, all right? If people are dying, you don't know why they're dying. You just know that one is uglier than the other, and one has boils, and one has pox, and one has... But the plague is the plague, right? So the plague came back, and people started singing this song. And the reason they started singing this song was because it harkened back to an era where women were exalted at this time of year. Why? Because at one time Europe was pagan, and that the major pagan religion, no matter what name they give it, so like there's no religion called pagan, right? There's no religion called heathen. There's no religion called witchcraft. They're all the same thing. They all mean anybody who is an infidel, anybody who is not a Christian, right? So the Greek Byzantine church would say, ethnikos, you're ethnic. If you live in the heaths, you're not a Christian, therefore we can ethnically cleanse you, heathen, all right? That's their word. Now the Roman church said pagan. They say the pagansis, if you live north of Rome, outside of proper Rome, where the good Italian, Latin Romans live, is that the pagansis are the people who worship the goddess. They practice what they call the Egyptian heresies. That means all of them were goddess worshippers. Why were they goddess worshippers? Because the Greco-Roman Empire swept Europe before the Roman Empire, and they worshipped the goddess. Not just the goddess, they had the god too, and they had a trinity. Their trinity was the Father, the Son, and the Mother. All right, remember the Mother? Okay, so the Roman Church changed that to the Holy Ghost. All right, so the Greek Church say the Father, the Son, and Sophia. All right, so Sophia is the mother. And so we've changed Sophia to knowledge. The Roman Church did the same thing. When we say, like with the candle, that this is the love of God, we are literally saying this is the lover of God. This is the mother of Jesus. This is the mother who is pregnant right now and is about to give birth to the ultimate joy. And so in the 1500s, there was a song that came out. And that song was in Latin, and that song was only sung in Finland. Now, since then, this song has taken over and is probably the most sung song on this particular week. That song is called Gaudete. Gaudete comes from Finland, and it was a Latin song that was found. And it was found in a songbook, and it was published by the church. And the church is the Church of Finland, all right? So this is a Reformed church. And so they put out a book that was called Dia Cantiones, the Ecclesiastes de Vicaria, which simply means songs of the people as published by the bishops, all right? But the actual book that they found was called Dia Cantiones, not Pia Cantiones, all right? So they were not pious songs of the folk people. They were goddess songs of the folk people, specifically written by women and translated by women into Latin. Now, this is really important because in 1582, when this song was published, before that time, for women to translate songs into Latin was punishable by death. Women learning Latin was illegal. Women writing Latin was illegal. women translating their songs into Latin was illegal. Now, I'm a priest of voodoo, and one of the things that people say is that we syncretize things. We hide under different saints, right? So Papa Legba could be Saint Martin, or he could be Saint John the Baptist, or but voodoo is everywhere. Voodoo simply means your gods. You do with your gods. If you're not a Christian, what you're doing to hide the fact that you're not a Christian, that's voodoo. That's heathenism, that's paganism, that's witchcraft. All of those things are covered in the laws of the church. And in the laws of the church in Finland, which followed the Catholic laws, there is a book called the Malleus Maleficarium, and the Malleus Maleficarium is the hammer against witches. How do we kill the witches? So in 1582, a book comes out that this particular song is in, but a whole bunch of other songs, and they are all songs to the Mother Mary. And the Mother Mary at that time, to them, and all over Europe, and all over North Africa, and all into Turkey and Anatolia, and into the Russian steppes, was called Isata. Asiet, Isis, Astarte, Ashra, all of these were the names of the Mother of God. And Isata literally means the love of God, right? So when we hear people say God gave his love, God sent his love, the love of God, it's not a feeling that God has. It is the other aspect of him. It is the other half of him. And so where knowledge and love have become philosophical concepts, they really were anthropomorphized ideas of what God itself actually was. And so halfway through the most severe months of penitence, we used to do what was called Gaudete. Gaudete was a time of festivity and joy. We would rejoice. We would put on our brightest colors. We would put on the forbidden color of pink because that was gaudy. That's where that word comes from. Gaudete means to be festive, to be joyous, and it means something even deeper. On this Advent day was the day that women came out and they worshiped the goddess by wearing bright colors, by putting on and having pink roses. And what they were doing was they were celebrating the heroism of the door of Ezekiel being closed. So if you listen to the song Gaudete, they talk about the door of Ezekiel being closed. Well, what they're talking about is the vagina, all right? And so Gaudete refers to the birth of Christ, that it's about to happen on the solstice. This is next week, right? So Mary is great with child, and she is now beginning to open the gates, all right? So she's like effaced to 3 centimeters or something. And all the moms know what that means. All of this is about the importance of this week. In 1582, it was important because the largest epidemic of influenza was sweeping across Europe. And for several years, women had stopped having children because they noticed that you would get the influenza and you would die. Your children would be stillborn, and there was a 1 in 4 chance that you yourself would die. The Finnish church, the Anglican church, the Church of the Byzantium, the Eastern Orthodox Church, was trying to convince women to do the heroic thing, have children. To be not like Christ, but to be heroic like Christ's mother. And so Gaudete is about being yourself. It's about coming out. It's about being heroic. It's about doing things and creating joy despite what is going on, whether it be the bubonic plague, the flu, the plague before it, the Spanish flu, or COVID-19 that we have right now. So as we go into the meditation today, I want you to think of joy not as a noun, but as a verb. And I want you to think of the act of rejoicing as doing the most joyous thing that you can possibly do, despite the fact that it may kill you, despite the fact that you may be killed for doing it. That the act of giving joy is an act of heroism. And that's my wish for you today, is that as you rejoice, don't just sing songs, don't just give money, don't just feel good, or don't feel bad because you don't think you can at this particular time, not just because it's Lent or it's Advent, but because the suffering that you're doing right now has a purpose. It has a meaning. And there is no greater suffering than childbirth, I'm told. I've got 7 children, and I did nothing to make that happen. Well, I did a little bit, but I did the joyous part. We think of rejoicing as the Advent, like the sperm donors have all the fun, But really, Gaudete, that kind of rejoicing, is to give joy. And in the same way that love is the lover of God, is aisata, joy, the actual word for joy, is, if you listen to Latin, Jesu, joy of man's desire. Jesus is joy. The baby is joy. The product of our pain is joy. The work and heroism of mothers is joy. And so as you rejoice today, and hopefully throughout the season, and hopefully as we go into a new year, I want you to know that all of the things that you see as suffering will result in joy. And that the most heroic thing that you can do is to find a way to give love and to give joy. Because God is not a white-haired old man. God is also the feminine. God is also love. Today, as priests all over the world don their pink robes, they will do this. They will remove the cowl from their head that represents the holy symbol of a baby that is born with powers and special gifts. This is a pagan symbol, the cowl meaning that the baby is joyous and holy and sacred. The cowl is the emergence of the priest as a vicarious symbol of Christ emerging from the vagina that is his vestments and his robes. So think about that the next time you see a priest do that. But today, it's simpler to think about the pink candle and honoring the mother who lights the candle for us today, the pink rose, love. And I want us to close our eyes. But before we do this, I want to point out Ray over here. I reminded Ray today of a song. 40 years ago, Ray and I was part of a team that included Rodney Vaccaro. Some of you might know him. And Rodney wrote this particular song. It's a song about heroism. And Ray actually wrote the music and forgot that he actually wrote it. So we have not practiced this song or anything like this, but I know it's in him somewhere, and I want to make it our meditation today, and I want you to listen to the words. Sometimes it's hard to be a hero. Times it's hard to be the, hey, mister, can you come here? I need you. Hard to be. Sometimes it's hard to be. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard. When you feel your back is breaking and you are aching for someone to carry the load, so you may rest. Heroism and grace and joy are the same things if we think of them as verbs. If we think of them as things we do, as we think of them as things we give and not think, not receive. Meditate on love and joy as gifts that we give, that the presents we give at this time of year are simply metaphors. The candles that we light are simply metaphors. The colors that we wear, the things that we do are metaphors of things that are more real than the things that we think that we're missing. Sometimes it's hard when you feel your back is breaking and you are aching for someone to carry the load, so you may rest. Sometimes it's hard to be the someone. Sometimes it's hard to be the, hey, mister, can you come? I need you. Hard to be. Sometimes it's hard to be. Sometimes it's hard. But be a hero. Be a hero deep inside, for you will find that it's you that has come to guide you. Be a hero. Be a hero. Thank you, Ray. Thank all of you. Thank you, Susan, for lighting the candle. And thank all of you here and out there. And please, please give joy, give love, and give money because we need to keep the heat and the lights and everything on until we can all be here together again. And I thank you all for being here, wherever here is for you, and happy holidays.
Thank you.